the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, welcome back. Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Thursday afternoon. Ryan Callahan of GoVols247 is here. Ryan, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you, Chase?
Pretty good. David Sanders is now going to make it in. It was the will he or won't he take any more visits before his mid-August commitment date. Nebraska, he's going to be in Lincoln first because there's just been so many twists and turns in this recruitment for the number 2 overall player, the number 1 offensive tackle in the 2025 247 composite rankings. Ryan, my first question to you is, does it surprise you that David Sanders ended up going back on the road here before his commitment? And then part 2, is it good for Tennessee that Ohio State is not one of the 2 spots for David Sanders this weekend?
Good question on the second one for sure. On the first one, I'm not shocked that he's going back on the road. His family acknowledged as long ago as last week that they were strongly considering the possibility of going back out on the road. I heard some talk earlier this week of at least it being a possibility that he could end up at Tennessee on July 31st for their first practice. So there were some different possibilities kicked around before they finalized everything. So knew it was in play. Not surprised that he's ended up deciding to take more visits. It's a little surprising in the sense that he and his family have been on so many visits, you weren't sure how much more they needed to see. But I think there was a big push from Nebraska in particular to get him back on campus, because I think his official visit there is the only time he's ever been there. So obviously for Nebraska to have a real shot, they probably felt they needed to get him back on campus, and they really wanted to make that happen. So not sure if that was the incentive, the main thing that convinced them to go back on the road. But I think the positive thing here for Tennessee is obviously that if he is going back on the road, Tennessee's still one of the stops. And not only that, but still the last stop. It looks like as of right now, we're expecting his visit to Knoxville on Saturday and Sunday to be his final visit. The dead period technically does not start until next Thursday, August 1st. So he could, in theory, take visits Monday through Wednesday if he wanted to. But like most high school football players this time of year, he's got his own team to worry about. So the weekend is probably the only time he has available in his schedule before he would need to get back into workouts and practices and things like that. So he will probably be making his final stop in Knoxville. And that's got to make you feel good if you're Tennessee getting the last visit before he makes his announcement on August 17. As for whether it's a good thing that Ohio State's not getting a visit, there's a couple different ways you could see that. I think it's one of those things in the NIL era that you just never know what angle there might be involved in this. You see some players, they'll take a visit and it might be with the idea that another school might react to that visit in terms of upping their NIL pitch or something like that. So you never know if there's another angle to that, maybe where you're trying to incentivize another school to get more involved. I don't think that's what's happening with David Sanders, but you just never know. So you can read into that multiple different ways. So I think that's fans that maybe overthink the possibilities. I think I've talked with some people who were kind of saying, even if he visits Tennessee, I'm not necessarily going to feel good about it because he might be trying to angle for something else with another team. So I don't think that's what's happening, but you just never know in this era what is at play. Or even if that's not his incentive, maybe that's the outcome. Maybe Ohio State gets alarmed by the fact that he doesn't visit there, and it causes them to get desperate. And something like happened with Da'Saahn Brame last month. They make a late push that changes things. So you just never know. But I think it is, generally speaking, a good sign that it's playing out this way, because it shows Tennessee is right there at the top of his list. Beyond that, I don't know how much there is to read into this, because Nebraska still might have ground to make up, and this visit might not do as much as they would like it to. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see what we hear coming out of the weekend. There's a lot of outcomes that could be in play.
Does this change who also might pop in this weekend now that David Sanders is coming in? Do you think some other big-time recruits, McIntyre and company, or were they already going to be there this weekend? Because I know, is Morris coming in this weekend or no? Is that next weekend?
Yeah, DeJuan Morris is scheduled to be in, and George McIntyre, for that matter. This has been in the works, I think, for days. Okay. He is going to be in town this weekend. I think he is expected for days that David Sanders would be coming into town this weekend. It was just a matter of whether they were going to finalize that plan and go forward with that. But I think he had been under the impression that Sanders was going to be in. So he's been planning, I think, for a while to be making this trip this weekend. So, yeah, there will be a good number of guys in town this weekend. Maybe the biggest thing is that, some guys who are getting ready to announce or closing in on decisions like Lagonza Hayward, Onus Conan Banny, they're supposed to be back in town as well. We'll see about Jaden Perlotti. I haven't heard a final answer on that one yet, but that's, he's a possibility from what I've been told to this point. So there's still some interesting possibilities out there for 2025 visitors, which normally we don't see that a whole lot with this late July event they have right before the end of the summer. It's usually a situation where they've locked in most of the commitments they're going to get before the end of the summer, and it's sort of shifting the attention to the junior class coming up. And this year, it looks like it's going to be more of a balanced approach where there will be some 2026 prospects in town led by Da'Saahn Brame, the 5-star quarterback, but it's going to be, several noteworthy 2025 targets. So this is a little bit different from what we normally see with this late July event.
Interesting. How do you explain the Huskers angle here? Because I think a lot of Tennessee fans are like trying to connect the dots of like, okay, does it go back to just simply Matt Rule had a connection with the family back when he was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers? Is it Dylan Raiola a factor here? Is there relationships that we just didn't see from the outside and overlooked with Nebraska? Because obviously they come out of nowhere before with Dylan Raiola this past cycle where they were just kind of lying in the weeds and they actually end up with the number 1 overall quarterback. He's going to start as a true freshman. It looks like Nebraska's got money. They've got, I think their NIL program, they've figured out a little bit in the Big Ten. They're rising. Matt Rule, one of the better college football coaches, obviously with an NFL background. He talks about like we're now what did he say about the Big Ten this week? Is like the NFL conference, or we're the most like the NFL or something like that this week. Where is that part of the appeal maybe for David Sanders and why they're popping in here is just that, hey, we'll develop you like an offensive lineman. I know what it's like to be an offensive lineman in the NFL. I've coached a lot of them. I have experience. I can get you there and get you most prepared. What is the pitch and what is the angle as to why Nebraska is kind of snuck in here at the end for David Sanders?
Well, keep in mind they did get an official visit in somewhat early May. I think the second weekend in May. So they got an official visit from him before most of the teams that hosted him on official visits, which mostly happened in June. So they've been in it for a while. I think they've done. I think part of it's just how they've recruited him. They've done a good job there. There is some. I don't know the extent of it, but there is some sort of connection there. I think between the Rule family and some people in Charlotte, maybe around David Sanders. I don't know if there was a direct connection with him, but maybe some people in Charlotte who know the Rule family from his time with the Carolina Panthers. So that's maybe helped a little bit. And part of it is I think people maybe overlook this a little bit when it comes to offensive linemen. That's a position where you don't really have to worry about where you go as much. It's not there. You don't have to worry as much about a particular scheme or playing in a certain type of offense. Even if you play in a bad offense, the NFL is going to find you usually if you're a good offensive lineman. So
Northwestern, the last 5 to 7 years.
Right. So there's plenty of examples of guys getting drafted off of bad teams as good offensive linemen. And especially if you had the pedigree that David Sanders is going to have coming out of high school, he could go to Charlotte and probably be a first-round pick. I mean, there are lots of possibilities for a guy like that. So that could be part of it, just not being worried quite as much about that. And yeah, Matt Rule obviously has the NFL background that maybe strengthens the sales pitch there. Some people I've spoken with are still a little skeptical of the Nebraska angle because of the distance for a family that is pretty close, like David Sanders' family is. I think that's a concern on their part, and maybe that's why they're taking the visit to see if that's something that, to kind of get a feel again for how easy is it to make this trip, not just a one-time basis. Like, can we see ourselves making this flight on a regular basis? Because that is a hassle for a family to think about. So I think that's one of the reasons you think this maybe still works in Tennessee's favor, that distance is on their side among what appear to be the 3 front runners. Ohio State, even not as close as Tennessee to Charlotte. So I think distance is working in their favor. And, beyond that, I think NIL is probably part of it. It's not everything, but I think it would be naive to overlook that angle. And Nebraska, as you said, has been competitive, and in the battle for a top 5 player in the country, that's usually going to be a factor. So we'll see what comes out of that this weekend. It's been fascinating to find out kind of more and more over the past couple of weeks that, hey, Nebraska is in this a little more than we thought at first. I think people looked at the group of finalists and kind of wrote them off maybe and assumed it was Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia. It's interestingly enough, Georgia, that we hear nothing about, really is a strong contender in that one here down the stretch. So I think it is kind of between those 3 teams. And, again, even with Ohio State, we'll kind of see what happens after this weekend. And you never know. In this day and age, I've just seen too many of these change on a dime in the last week or 10 days before an announcement. You got to kind of wait and see what's going to transpire over the next few days before we get a feel for where this thing is headed down the stretch. Other than I still think Tennessee is in pretty good shape and has been for a while.
Someone else who is going to commit this weekend, Shady Hayward, looks like a Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee battle. How do you feel about Hayward and where things are going into this weekend, the 4-star safety out of Toombs County, Georgia? And what does he profile as if he ends up picking the Vols? Because there's a lot of people who have assumed that he's just going to grow into being a linebacker. The next level, Tennessee just got somebody who fits that same kind of build where you're not really sure with Christian Gass, where is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be a middle linebacker? My theory on this is just get the talent and it'll figure itself out. Like I trust William Inge and Tim Banks and company and Rodney Garner and Mike Eckler to figure out where to best utilize these guys and where they're ultimately going to land. But in terms of Shady Hayward, does he profile as a safety at Tennessee and people are overthinking it? And also how good are Tennessee's chances to land the 4-star out of Georgia this weekend?
Yeah, I think Tennessee has been in good shape there for a while. And I think that was kind of evident going into his official visits. He was back in town for the 865 live event back in late May. And after that visit, he referred to Tennessee as his leader, as he had already done that on multiple occasions. So with each of these official visits he took after that, it was sort of a head scratching to some people that like, wait, now he's talking up Georgia. Now he's talking up South Carolina. Now Florida's the leader. It was each week it was changing. And I think to a certain degree, some of that was maybe window dressing. I think he kind of wanted to stir up some drama a little bit, make it seem like it wasn't a foregone conclusion that he was going to Tennessee. But in reality, I think Tennessee's been kind of up there at the top of his list all along, and at least one of the teams to beat all along. So I think the Vols are in good shape. They got the last official visit last month. It obviously is a good sign for Tennessee that he's going to be back in Knoxville the weekend he commits. So I think this is shaping up very well for Tennessee. It would be an upset, frankly, if Tennessee is not the pick. That would be a huge pickup. I mean, even though it's been one where they've, again, been in good shape for a while, this is a top 100 player nationally and a guy that speaking with our analysts that have seen him in person, and I saw him in person at a camp earlier this year, back in February. He's a really good football player. He worked out at a receiver at the Under Armour camp he went to. And you see the film on defense. I don't think he's a receiver at the next level, but the fact that he could even do that and look pretty good at it in a camp setting like that shows you what kind of football player you're dealing with. So yes, he's that bigger safety, but I think again the fact that he could go to a camp and look pretty good at receiver shows you he's not slow. Speed's not a concern to the point that you just say he has to be a linebacker. So I think it's just going to depend on what he does long term, developmentally. Is he going to put on another 15 pounds? If he does, he's probably going to be a linebacker. If he stays close to where he is now, he could stay at safety. So I think it's just going to depend on how badly he wants to stay at safety and sort of what he does from here physically. But he's just a good football player. And like you, I'm of the belief that you just get these guys in your program and sort of figure out what they're going to do naturally and don't hold them back necessarily. At the same time, I've seen some guys hold themselves back. Derek Barnett, Tennessee for years thought he was going to be in the recruiting process, thought he was going to be a 3-technique defensive tackle. He actually, I think, left Tennessee weighing less than he did when he arrived on campus. So he wanted to be a defensive end. He made himself a defensive end. He was very good at defensive end, and that's not what you would have projected coming out of high school. So sometimes you just never know, and it depends on what a player really wants to do and sort of what his body does in a weight room once he gets on campus. But I think he can stay at safety. It just depends on maybe how committed to doing that he is. But no matter where he lines up, I think he's just one of those guys who's a good football player, very physical, still pretty quick, just good ball skills, can do it all.
I like it. What's going on with Da'Saahn Brame?
Tennessee is, it obviously didn't end when he announced his commitment to Oregon in late June. And we reported Thursday afternoon on GoVols247 that he is going to be back in Knoxville, scheduled to arrive Thursday night. So by the time you see this, he may already be in town on campus. So it's shaping up very well for Tennessee to have a shot at flipping him. And that's one that, kind of quickly picked up some steam. I think there was, it went from being, hope that he's going to be back on campus this fall to hope that Tennessee is going to flip him. So it's one of those situations where, give Tennessee a lot of credit for being persistent and just knowing that there's enough of a relationship there that it was worth the time and worth the trouble to keep recruiting him. Because sometimes when you could, from Tennessee's perspective, you could have thought, hey, we got played a little bit when it went down the way it did, when they were in position to land him 24 hours or so before he announced, and then Oregon came in, made a late push and changed his mind. You could say, well, is it worth the time? Can we trust this kid? Whatever. But they knew there was enough of a relationship there. They knew how much he liked Tennessee. and they just sort of stayed on him, kept chipping away, and now here in a matter of less than a month, it looks like they've got a real shot at flipping him. So I think this one is heated up pretty quickly, and give Tennessee a lot of credit for reading the situation correctly. And there's a reason you've seen, some crystal ball predictions and things like that for Tennessee this week, because I think the Vols have some real traction there, as the visit would suggest.
How does it change Carson Sneed and Kendry Harrison for next year? Because Tennessee, if they end up with Brame, does that mean they can? I just wonder, because now everything is like just keeping everybody happy, keeping the numbers, making sure that all works. But with two big targets and two, I think, higher profile targets in next year's class that Tennessee is certainly in on, and Harrison and Sneed, does that change it? They just will be one probably now. You don't have to worry. You're not going to swing harder. Does that mean Tennessee might focus more on one? Obviously, Sneed with the connection to Tennessee felt more likely. But when you look at that recruitment, how does adding Brame change how they're going to recruit the 2026 tight end class?
Yeah, I think Harrison is the type of player that you're probably not going to back off of him no matter what. He's just one of those freakish athletes that it's hard not to go after him full steam ahead. And Carson Sneed, for that matter, is a major in-state priority that they really covet as well. So I don't think it really changes anything as far as the approach. The better question might be, does it change the reality of what you're likely to get? Does it make it harder to sign two tight ends in the 2026 class if that's the way it played out? And it might be tricky to do that anyway. That's sort of what's unique about this for Tennessee, is Da'Saahn Brame was not only not turned off by the idea of being part of a two tight end class, he almost seemed to prefer it. And he's mentioned it multiple times that he likes the idea of teaming up with Jack Van Dorselaer and being part of a two tight end class. So the fact that Oregon didn't have a tight end in its class didn't really help their cause significantly when they were battling, the first time around. So it's sort of just been a weird recruitment in that way, that he's one of these kids that wasn't turned off by that. And next year it might be that kind of situation where Carson Sneed doesn't want to be part of a two tight end class. Harrison might not want to be either. We'll just have to wait and see about that. But I think it does make it harder probably to sign a two tight end class again next year. And it might have been tough either way, but Tennessee is well positioned with Carson Sneed. Harrison, that's going to be more of a battle, because you've got North Carolina that really covets him, has already offered him in basketball. Some other schools that are, heavy hitters that are going to be tough to beat too. So that's a major battle. You probably couldn't assume Tennessee was going to be in good shape with both of those guys to the finish line anyway. So you certainly don't hold back on Da'Saahn Brame because of that possibility. And obviously you got to take it 1 year at a time. So Tennessee's going to keep recruiting those guys, I think, and we'll see where it goes. And if they do end up with Brame, they'll just deal with that as it comes. But I don't think they'll back off either of those guys or say that, hey, we're only taking one. If you could somehow get both, you do it. It just might make it harder.
I like it. Final thing here, Ryan. One of the things I'm most curious about this fall, and I wonder what the reality is here in terms of George McIntyre, who slid down to a 4-star. I'm curious from your perspective, what kind of senior year does he need to have to slide back up? Is it possible in your mind that he gets back up to the 5-star rating and that he ends up sliding back up? Because it seems like a lot of it was just the injury and not playing this spring, as to why he slid down a little bit the quarterback ranks. Is that kind of what it was, just him not being available for folks to see? And also, do you see a situation where he's going to be able to get back up to a unanimous 5-star this fall?
Well, just to be clear on the injury, so that he had a cut finger on his throwing hand, and that happened not long before the Elite 11 finals. So it was a very minor, very brief thing that he dealt with there. It did keep him from throwing a little bit this summer, but he was still able to participate in a couple of camps earlier this year. He went to the Elite 11 regional in Oxford, Mississippi, back in I think early April or maybe March, and then also in April was at the Under Armour camp that was held at his own school at Brentwood Academy. He obviously felt they needed to be at that since it was at his school, and they were very much making it clear they wanted him to be there. So he showed up at both those camps and didn't have the best day, I think, by all accounts, at either of those camps. So I think that's where the drop in the rankings came from. The unfortunate part is I think the Elite 11 finals could have helped his cause. I think that would have been a chance for him to maybe put that behind him, have a better day, show some of the national analysts who were there, because that's obviously a lot of eyeballs on that event. If he could have, shown himself to be at least, one of the top guys there, it would have meant a lot to kind of put those two performances behind him. So he's got some questions to answer going into his senior year. I don't think he's still ranked in the top 100 nationally, right? So anytime you're talking about a quarterback of that stature, guys see a bright future for him still. It's just I think they believe maybe he's not as immediately projectable as they thought, that it's going to maybe take him a little bit of time. So that's not the end of the world. It just might mean the projection as far as how ready he is and he's not going to be a day one starter at Tennessee, it looks like anyway, with Nico being back in 2025. So he's not a day one starter, but that's okay because for the situation he's coming into, he'll be just fine. I think he does have a chance to move back up. Keep in mind Harrison Bailey moved up and was a 5-star for one network after having a good senior year. Maybe that one didn't work out at the college level so well, but it shows you that a good senior year can change the way people view you. And I think that was one of the questions some people had about him too. Fair or not, there is this belief among some analysts and people in the industry that a truly elite quarterback could elevate his team beyond winning in just 2 games his junior year. And so that was maybe a question some people had. I think Brentwood Academy is set up to have a better year this year. So if he goes out, wins 7 or 8 games, at least has a good senior year, I think that could answer some questions that maybe help him move back up in the coming months.
Is it too late to transfer to Alcoa?
Maybe a little late for that, but no, he's the big thing for Tennessee is he's still going to be an early enrollee, and that's something that was not a sure thing right away when he committed. They had to sort of work that out. Brentwood Academy, a lot of these private schools don't allow that, but he's on track to graduate in December. So no matter what, he'll be on campus in January, and that's just that much sooner that Tennessee's coaches get to start working with him and get to develop him on campus.
I love it. Ryan, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at GoVols247 this week?
Man, busy weekend. A lot of recruiting coverage, a lot of visitors in town. We'll have that all covered for you with Tennessee's big summer event here on Saturday. Some obviously upcoming announcements. Lagonza Hayward on Saturday. We'll see what happens with Da'Saahn Brame, and obviously some other guys closing in on decisions like Onus Conan-Banny. We'll see if Jaden Perlotti makes a summer decision. David Sanders just a few weeks away. So all that, and then by the way, preseason camp starts in less than a week. So lots going on and fun time.
Dwayne Morris too, right?
What's that?
Oh, and Dwayne Morris too.
Oh, that's Dwayne Morris. We'll see whether he makes it. I'm not sure what his timeline will look like coming out this weekend, but an important visit to watch for sure. And Tennessee getting him back on campus, obviously a good sign there. So we'll see. I don't know if it's a situation where he might consider carrying things into the season or wait a couple weeks or what he'll do. So certainly a noteworthy visit, and a lot that will come out of this weekend, and we'll have it all covered for you on GoVols 24/7.
I love it. Ryan, thank you as always, my friend, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.